Come closer. Let the night wrap around you like a heavy wool cloak. Forget the world you came from and step into mine. Here we do not speak loudly, we whisper, because the things we speak of are listening. My name is Ember. They once called me witch. Now I simply remember. I remember stories the world tried to bury, tales that do not end with happily ever after, but with aching feet, burning lungs, and silence. You're safe here. The candle burns, the shadows stay back, and I'll keep watch. But as your eyes grow heavier, I want you to picture this. A woman in a simple dress. The year is 1518. The summer is sweltering. And in the middle of a cobbled street in Strasbourg, she begins to dance. No music plays, no festival is held, no laughter, no wine, no reason. She doesn't stop. Her feet move as if pulled by invisible strings. Her arms flail. Her breath shortens. Her body jerks like a puppet in a storm. The villagers stare. A few chuckle. Some cross themselves. And still she dances. For hours. Then through the night. Then the next day. And then, as if summoned, others join her. One by one, then dozens, then hundreds. And so begins one of the strangest, most disturbing, and forgotten events in medieval history. A true mystery. Tonight, under the cloak of candlelight, I will tell you about the plague that made people dance until their feet bled, until their ribs cracked, until they collapsed and died. Was it madness? Was it divine punishment? Or was something darker moving behind the veil of the world? So tuck yourself in, close your eyes if you dare, and listen carefully, because once the rhythm begins, you may not be able to stop.
July 1518, Strasbourg, a city nestled beside the Rhine River, once under the grip of the Holy Roman Empire. It is hot, the kind of heat that clings to skin and chokes the air. The harvest has not come. The people are tired, hungry, frightened. For years they've suffered war, famine, and rumors of a plague carried not by rats, but by fear itself. And in the middle of it all, a woman walks into the street. No one remembers her exact face, not truly. The record books name her only as Frau Trophia. She is ordinary, a wife, perhaps, a mother. She does not wear jewels. She does not shout. She simply begins to dance. Her hands twitch, her arms swing wildly, her bare feet slap the hot stone road in a feverish rhythm. There is no music, only her breath and the stunned silence of neighbors watching from windows and doorways. Some think she's mad, some think she's possessed, but most believe she'll stop. A few minutes pass. She doesn't. Hours pass. She continues. Sunlight fades to dusk. The sky bleeds violet and gold. And still, Frau Trophia dances. By midnight, her dress is soaked with sweat. Her lips are dry, her knees tremble, but her feet never stop. The next morning, she returns to the same street, to the same rhythm, as if the cobblestones remember her movements and call her back. Villagers begin to whisper, "She's bewitched." No, it's a punishment from God. She's seen the devil and he's marked her soul. But no one approaches her. No one dares touch her. On the third day, she begins to bleed. Not from wounds, but from exhaustion. Her soul's split open, her clothes blister, and yet she moves faster, as if afraid of what will happen if she ever stops. By the seventh day, she collapses. She sleeps, finally, but her sleep is shallow. She mumbles in her dreams, and when her eyes open, she rises and dances again. That same week, 3 more join her. One is a baker's daughter, one a fisherman's widow, the third a priest's servant boy no more than 15. Each of them begins like she did, slowly, then violently, then endlessly. The villagers try to restrain them, tie them down, lock them in their homes, but somehow they escape back to the streets to dance. Even in sleep they twitch, their limbs jerk as if controlled by strings. They moan, some scream, but never speak. And when they wake, they dance again. Doctors are summoned, but they can only shake their heads. This is no ordinary sickness. This is no plague they've seen before. They offer the only explanation they can. Their blood is hot. The heat must be released. Let them dance it out. So they do. They build a stage. In the town square, they hire musicians, fiddlers, drummers, and place the afflicted on display. Dance halls of suffering, entertainment for the curious, and treatment for the condemned. But still it spreads. By the end of the month, there are over 400 dancers, men, women, children, priests, nobles, even a pregnant woman who collapses mid-step and does not rise again. And with each new body, the air grows heavier. Some say they hear whispers in the night, a low chanting in a language no one speaks anymore. Some swear they see shadows moving in rhythm, even when the streets are empty. Whatever this is, it is no longer just madness. It is a force, alive, hungry, and spreading. And as the sun sets once more and the music plays, one child begins to weep as their feet move on their own. And somewhere nearby, watching from a window, an old woman whispers, "Saint Vitus is dancing with us again." And so it begins. But this is only the first step. The question remains, what truly caused this? Was it a sickness, a curse, or something far older, waiting to be seen? Let's go deeper, shall we?
They thought it was over, that it would stop with her, but Strasbourg had only just begun to dance. 3 days after Frau Trofea first collapsed, the streets began to fill again, not with markets or parades, but with dancers. First 3, then 5, then 10. By the second week, over 30 people were moving as she did, uncontrolled, unstoppable, afraid. Their faces twisted, not in joy, but in terror. They wanted to stop, but their bodies would not let them. Children wept while their legs jerked beneath them. Mothers screamed as their arms thrashed against the sky. A man collapsed face first on the stones, his teeth shattered from the fall, and when he woke, he danced again. They bled, they sobbed, they collapsed in filthy alleyways and straw beds, and still they danced. No words passed between them. They didn't speak, they didn't sleep, they only moved, as if the rhythm itself had taken root in their bones. Witnesses began writing it down. A local merchant scrawled in his ledger, "This morning the shoemaker joined them. At noon he fainted. At dusk he was dead, his feet blackened, his mouth filled with foam. He died dancing." Another wrote, "I saw a woman with no shoes. Her soles had peeled away like bark from a tree. She smiled as she moved, but her eyes were screaming." By the end of July, the city was gripped by panic. Over 400 dancers filled the squares and alleys. Merchants boarded up their shops. Fathers chained their sons indoors, but the dancers still came. Some walked for miles just to join them, as if drawn by something no one could see. The city council met behind locked doors. The clergy gathered in shadowed chapels, and the physicians, the physicians. They opened the dancers' mouths, checked their pulses, bled them with leeches, burned herbs in the corners of rooms, but none of it worked. Their diagnosis? Overheated blood. They believed the heart was inflamed, too much passion, too much fire. Their prescription? More dancing. Yes, you heard me right. They built a stage in the town square, cleared a space, and ordered musicians to play, drums, flutes, viols. They believed the rhythm could burn the sickness out, that the body would exhaust itself, and the soul would be healed. But they were wrong. What they built was not a cure. It was a theater of suffering. People collapsed on the stage mid-song. Some vomited blood. Others bit their tongues in half. One man's heart stopped mid-spin. He died on the final beat of the drum. But no one stopped the music. The council feared if they ended it, the dancers would riot, or worse, the city itself would fall under the curse. So the show went on, and then something stranger began to happen. People not dancing began to hear the rhythm. Shopkeepers said they woke at night, tapping their foot to a beat they didn't remember hearing. A maid said she couldn't sleep unless she heard the thud of feet against the stone. A man said his prayers began to rhyme with the rhythm until he was no longer sure which words were his. And then there were the shadows, small ones, fleeting. Some said they looked like children, others like wolves walking upright, but always dancing, always moving just beyond the edge of vision. Were they real? Who can say? Fear gave birth to suspicion, and suspicion always gives birth to violence. A young girl, age 11, was accused of starting it. They said she cursed Frau Trophea in the market weeks before the first dance. She was dragged from her home, tied to a post, forced to confess. She said, "I only whispered a song." They said she was a witch, and before nightfall, she was gone. Others followed, old women, foreigners, a man who claimed to hear music in the stones. They were beaten, exiled, some simply disappeared. No cure, no peace, just fear and the sound of feet. The city could not explain what was happening. And when mortals run out of answers, they look to the divine or to the damned. In Strasbourg, the name that passed between trembling lips was Vitus. Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers, of epileptics, of madness, and plagues. To some, he was a protector, to others, a punisher, but all agreed on one thing. He listened when no one else would. And perhaps he was listening now. The Bishop of Strasbourg ordered every church bell to toll at once, not for worship, but for warning. Priests were told to speak the name of Vitus only in Latin, never aloud, never near the dancers. But it was too late. That name had already begun to echo through the streets like a spell. Children carved it into wooden doors. Old women whispered it into wells. Dancers moaned it in their sleep. Vitus, Vitus. The church feared the people would start to worship him again, not as a saint, but as a god. Saint Vitus was no stranger to strange miracles. Long before Strasbourg, his legend haunted the hills of Italy. He was said to be a child martyr, burned alive, boiled in oil, thrown to wild beasts, but nothing killed him. He laughed in the flames. He sang as the lions licked his feet. And when his bones were buried, those who danced on his grave were said to be healed of seizures and spasms. But sometimes they didn't stop dancing, even after the healing, even after the saints had left. Some claimed they still dance there now, under moonless skies, where the trees lean inward and the soil moves like breath beneath the grass. In Strasbourg, that legend became a doctrine, and the doctrine became a fear. The church declared the dancing a plaga diaboli, a plague of the devil, a punishment for sin, for lust, for gluttony, for listening to the wrong music in the wrong tavern with the wrong kind of people. One priest wrote in his sermon, "The devil stirs their limbs with invisible hands. He makes them twitch like fish on a dry stone. They will dance until their skin cracks and they bleed their sins into the soil." Another priest disagreed. He believed it was not the devil, but God, striking them with holy madness to purge the city of its pride. He ordered a parade of pain. 100 men marched barefoot through Strasbourg, whipping their own backs with thorny reeds. Blood soaked the cobblestones. Children cried, but the dancers did not stop. One of the dancers even joined them, dancing between the flagellants until he collapsed at the altar steps and died smiling. The priest declared it a miracle. Others called it blasphemy, but none of them could explain what came next. The afflicted began to speak, not clearly, but in broken sentences, half prayers, half riddles. One woman shouted, "I see flames under my bed." Another said, "The bones are playing music." A man whispered, "He's watching from the bell tower." A merchant wrote in his diary, "I passed by the cathedral and saw 3 dancers kneeling on the steps. Their feet still moved, even as they prayed. One of them looked at me. His eyes were gone, and yet he saw me." Some began drawing symbols in the dirt, circles with dancing stick figures, lines of text with letters from no known tongue. One child traced a spiral with her finger on the wall of her home, over and over, until her nail split and her finger bled. When her parents tried to stop her, she bit her own hand. She survived, but never spoke again. The church was now in full retreat. They had tried prayer. They had tried music. They had tried confession. So they turned to something older. They sent the dancers, by ox cart and by foot,
to a mountain shrine of Saint Vitus. Days away, through rough terrain, no shoes, no rest. The afflicted were wrapped in wet cloth to cool their bodies, their wrists tied with twine to keep them from harming others or themselves. Some tried to flee into the forest, others threw themselves into rivers, but most obeyed. The shrine was a stone chapel, small, cracked, clinging to the cliffside like a forgotten tooth. The priests there were old, quiet, and afraid. They placed the dancers before the altar, anointed their feet with holy oil, forced communion wafers between clenched teeth, and whispered the 7 names of Vitus into their ears. 7 names not written in any Bible, not known to most. One priest claimed they were the names of the angels of motion. Others said they were the names Vitus had whispered from the pyre before his death. But the names are lost now, buried in the mountain, like the dancers. Some recovered. They awoke as if from a dream, crying, horrified. One woman clawed at her own legs, screaming, "These aren't mine. These were never mine." Others never woke up again. They danced in their sleep, then stopped, and their hearts stopped with them. No one buried them. They were left on the mountainside, where no one dared to retrieve them. The local villagers began to hear sounds from the chapel long after it was abandoned. Thumps, laughter, the creak of floorboards, as if someone was spinning slowly. One child claimed she saw a figure at the window, not a person, not quite, thin as bone, wearing a crown of reeds and dancing, always dancing. Years later, a monk returned to the shrine. He left a letter, tucked under a stone. It read, "I came to pray for the dead, but the floor is warm, and I hear drums when I sleep. I fear the mountain has learned to move." The church sealed the path, closed the chapel, and ordered the legend erased from every pulpit, every sermon, every scroll. But the people remembered, because the rhythm had already rooted itself, not in buildings, not in relics, but in memory, and memory does not die. The priests returned to their cities, the dancers faded, and Saint Vitus was buried again in silence. But you cannot bury a rhythm, not really, not when it knows your name, not when it has danced through your dreams. The church hoped the madness had ended, but it was only changing form. And in the quiet years that followed, new voices rose to explain it. Voices and cloaks, with scalpels and charts and theories. But even they would never agree.
The bells fell silent. The bodies were buried or lost, and Strasbourg tried to forget. But the world did not. Whispers of the dancing plague crept into neighboring towns, then across borders, and finally into history's strangest pages. What happened in 1518 was real. Too many accounts, too many names, too many graves. And yet, to this day, no one agrees on why it happened. Theories piled up like bones, each one more confident than the last, each one wearing a robe of science, of faith, of logic. But the truth? The truth does not dress so neatly. Let me show you what they believed and what they feared. The first theory was bread. Yes, bread. The most trusted food of the poor, their daily meal, their last comfort, and it betrayed them. Some say the people of Strasbourg ate contaminated rye infected with a fungus called Claviceps purpurea, a mold, a sickness, a silent assassin. Modern scientists call it ergot. Tiny black spores that grow on grain after wet seasons, invisible to the hungry, impossible to smell. But once eaten, madness. Ergot poisons the brain. It causes spasms, fever, hallucinations, burning skin, crawling insects beneath the flesh, visions of fire and flight and music no one else can hear. LSD, centuries before LSD. It seemed to make sense. People weren't themselves, their bodies twisted, their minds frayed. But there are problems. Ergot is a poison. It kills quickly, and it does not spread from person to person. How then did an entire city catch it? At once? In waves? And why did some people dance while others only watched? The bakers didn't die. The wealthy weren't affected. Only the common folk, the broken folk, the desperate ones. Was it the bread? Or was it something else hiding inside them already? Another theory, mass hysteria. A sickness of the soul, a fever of the mind. A doctor in the 20th century called it psychogenic illness, where one person's panic becomes everyone's panic, like a spark in dry grass. In Strasbourg, they had every reason to break. Years of famine, plague, war. The River Rhine had flooded that spring. Crops failed. Children starved. People were eating sawdust and praying to empty bowls. And the church offered guilt instead of comfort. They were told their suffering was punishment for lust, for greed, for dancing in taverns when they should have been on their knees. So maybe when Frau Trophäa stepped into the street and began to dance, she gave them permission to break, to cry without crying, to scream without making a sound.
to collapse in rhythm. It's happened before and after. In Italy, centuries earlier, people believed in the tarantella, a wild dance to cure the bite of the tarantula. But there was no bite, only belief. Women in southern Italy danced for days in temples and fields, saying the rhythm cured their sorrow, their rage, their loneliness. They danced to mourn miscarriages, to forget abusive husbands, to feel joy without shame. They said the spider's venom burned through music, but the spider never existed. And then there were the nuns. In the 15th and 16th centuries, dozens of convents reported possessions. Young nuns twitching, screaming, climbing walls, barking like dogs, claiming they were married to the devil. In one convent, 30 nuns meowed like cats for a week. In another, they danced in unison during prayer, eyes rolled back, mouths foaming. Doctors blamed womb hysteria. Priests blamed Satan. The nuns just cried. Some were whipped. Some were buried alive. Some were sent away and never seen again. But the pattern remained. Repressed, afraid, confined, and then release. Through movement, through madness, through music only they could hear. Modern psychologists say stress needs a shape. If you cannot scream, your body will. If you cannot run, your mind will flee for you. But again, how did they all choose the same shape, the same rhythm? Why dancing? Why not screaming? Why not stillness? And how did they dance themselves to death? There is a darker theory, not scientific, but whispered. Some believed a curse was laid on Strasbourg, not from a witch, but from the people themselves. A collective hex. A city so full of hunger and guilt that it turned inward and conjured something real. A tulpa, a spirit made from belief, an echo made solid. They believed in Saint Vitus, in punishment, in sacred rhythm, and so it came. What if belief was enough? What if they summoned the very thing they feared? A rhythm not of drums, but of sin made flesh. One that danced from shadow to shadow, entering the body like cold and leaving it only when the heart stopped. Not possession, not disease, but reflection. The city created its own executioner and danced at his feet. Another theory, ritual memory. One researcher proposed that the people of Strasbourg were enacting an ancient trauma, buried so deep it surfaced only in movement. The body remembers, even when the mind forgets. Could the dancing have been a reenactment? of an old rite, a fertility ritual, a mourning tradition from pre-Christian Europe. Something that once held meaning, but now returned as madness? They found old carvings near the Rhine, figures etched in stone, dancing in a circle. No faces, no eyes. One of them wears a crown. They date it before the church. They buried the stone and never spoke of it again.
But the theories didn't stop the fear. Years after the outbreak ended, people still locked their doors at dusk. Fathers warned daughters not to hum alone. Taverns banned drumming. Mothers braided charms into their children's hair, small iron keys tied with red thread to keep the rhythm out. Some say if you tap your foot too long in Strasbourg, the shadows still lean in to listen. And every year, on the anniversary, someone hears it. A thud, a shuffle, a heartbeat not their own. So which theory is true? Bread? Hysteria? Witchcraft? Collective grief? Or something else entirely? Ember does not choose. She never chooses, because some truths belong to the silence. And in that silence, one thing remains. It happened. It spread. It killed. And no one, not doctor, not priest, not scholar, has ever danced their way to the truth. Only to the grave. Ember, quietly, almost a whisper inside a whisper. Theories are comforting. They give the illusion of safety, of distance, of knowing. But the dancers of Strasbourg did not need explanations. They needed release. Whatever haunted them still walks, not in plague masks or black robes, but in cracked memories, in tired feet, in quiet music you didn't mean to hum. So if you ever feel your body sway to no song at no hour, don't ask where it came from. Ask why it chose you.
The dancing plague of Strasbourg was not the first, and it would not be the last. Though its flames burned brightest in that sweltering summer of 1518, whispers of similar madness stretch across centuries and continents, as though something travels with us, waiting, listening. Let me show you the map. In 1021, in a town along the Rhine, villagers gathered for a midsummer festival. By nightfall, 20 of them had collapsed in convulsions, their bodies trembling as if struck by lightning. They did not die, but they did not stop moving. They danced through the market, the forest, the fields. The town banned music for a generation. In 1247, a group of children in Erfurt began singing in the town square, then spinning, then leaping. Their parents tried to stop them, but the children twisted free and ran. They danced out of the city and into the woods. 30 children vanished. Some say they were never seen again. Others say they returned years later, silent, changed. In 1374, more outbreaks along the Rhine, people weeping as they danced, others laughing uncontrollably, some screaming names of saints, some shouting curses in dead languages. Witnesses said they saw one man dance until his feet were nothing but bone. In Italy, the tarantella took hold. People said they had been bitten by spiders, huge, hairy ones, but no one ever caught one. Doctors prescribed music. Drummers played day and night. Towns turned into clinics where rhythm replaced medicine. One woman danced beside her husband's grave for 6 days. She died with his name on her lips and dirt beneath her fingernails. In 1518, Strasbourg burned, and then the world tried to forget. But the rhythm did not die. In 1840s Madagascar, reports of women convulsing in temples, chanting, laughing, collapsing into trances. Locals called it the spirit sickness. In 1892, a missionary school in Malaysia closed for a week after students began twitching uncontrollably, mimicking each other's spasms. The missionaries blamed pagan spirits. In 1962, Tanzania, a boarding school for girls, one student begins laughing, then 2, then dozens. They laughed for hours, days, some until they fainted. Teachers fled. The school shut down. It spread to nearby villages. The government called it a laughing epidemic, but it wasn't funny. None of it was. All of it felt familiar. They all had one thing in common: fear. They occurred in communities under pressure, under watch, under weight. The mind tries to keep its secrets, but the body always speaks. Some twitched, some howled, some laughed, some danced, and some never came back. The world called them hysterical, possessed, delusional, but they all followed something unseen. A rhythm, a shadow, a call only they could hear. And they answered. Do you know what Ember said when I told her this? There are still places where it lingers, remote villages, broken cities, forgotten streets. They don't call it the dancing plague anymore. They call it burnout, panic, conversion disorder, group psychosis. But it moves the same way. And if you're quiet, still, alone, you might hear it. The beat beneath your breath. Now, Ember said, now we're ready for the end. But the end isn't peace. The end is what returns.
moved on. The dancers stopped. Their names faded from stone and memory. The world forgot. But the rhythm remembers. You see, not all echoes fade. Some grow quieter, some wait, and then they find a new stage. Centuries passed, cities changed, science rose like a new god, promising answers, protection, immunity from old fears. But the body still trembles, still breaks, still carries shadows it cannot explain. And sometimes those shadows dance. There are stories hidden in dusty newspapers, in medical journals written like confessions, in the frightened corners of YouTube forums and locked hospital rooms. Stories that sound too familiar. Let me show you. Tanganyika, 1962. A girls' boarding school in a quiet East African village. 3 students begin to laugh. Not joyfully, but uncontrollably, frenzied, desperate. It spreads. By the end of the week, 95 students are overcome, not with laughter, but with seizures, shaking limbs, sobbing, screaming. Their bodies move on their own. Some run into the forest, others collapse mid-step. They try to speak, but the sound that comes out is wrong. Within a month, it spreads to 14 schools and villages, 1,000 people. And then, just like Strasbourg, it fades. No cause, no pathogen, no poison. They call it mass psychogenic illness. But they cannot explain why it started with laughter and ended with silence.
South Korea, 2010s. A factory reports a sudden wave of collapse. Workers feel dizzy. Some faint. Others begin shaking, twitching, crying. One screams she's being watched by something behind the fluorescent lights. No gas leak, no virus, no explanation. They close the factory. A priest is called. He says nothing, but leaves holy water behind. A month later, it happens again in a different city. They say it's the pressure of modern life, of perfection, of being watched always. But Ember wonders, what if something old is still watching back? Even now, in the age of screens and signals, it stirs. A YouTuber confesses to sleepwalking in rhythm. A TikTok trend emerges where teens mimic seizures for clout, and some can't stop. A rural town in Eastern Europe reports a boy who danced through his own wedding and never spoke again. It sounds absurd until you hear the voices behind their eyes. Something is humming again, not loud, but low,
just beneath the noise of everyday life. A low drumbeat, a memory, a warning. You want a story, don't you? One from now, one I've kept close. All right. I met a girl years ago. She came to me in the woods, pale, silent. She had walked 3 nights alone. She didn't knock, just stood there barefoot and whispered, "I can't stop moving." Her name was Morel, 16. She said it started in dreams. She would wake with her sheets wrapped around her ankles, soaked in sweat. Once she woke in the barn, curled beneath the oxen. Once she woke by the river, her hands full of stones. Her mother locked her room. Her father prayed. But Morel still moved. At first small, a twitch, a tap. Then her legs began jerking in rhythm. Her breath shortened, her hands trembled. She stopped eating, she stopped speaking. Only her feet still moved. I kept her for 3 days. She slept, she wept. She wrote symbols in the dirt. Circles, always circles. On the 4th night, I awoke to the sound of steps. Not running, not walking, but dancing. I followed it through the trees to the stream, and there she was, spinning, alone, eyes closed, blood on her heels. The moon above her, the wind dead still, no music, but I heard it. A rhythm, low, ancient, steady. It pulled at me, soft at first, then harder. I stepped back, whispered her name, once, twice. She stopped and said, "He's waiting by the chapel, the one with no door." I never saw her again, but I know she wasn't lying. There is a chapel in the mountains with no door, only steps that lead to stone, and a single reed crown hanging on the wall. It was never built. It was always there. So, do I believe the plague ever ended? No. It changed clothes. It changed languages. But the steps are the same. In times of pain, the rhythm comes. Not to comfort, not to cure, but to collect. And maybe it's listening now to you, to your breath, to the way your fingers twitch when you're anxious, to the beat of your heart when the room goes still. Because the rhythm doesn't choose the weak. It chooses the waiting, the quiet ones, the watchers, the listeners. And once it finds you, well, let's just say I hope you like to dance. You've come far. Farther than most. You listened, you watched,
And now you know. The dancing plague, the town that writhed, the woman who couldn't stop, the shadows that swayed behind the eyes of children. They are real. They were always real. And somewhere, they still move. In old stories, in dusted books with broken spines, in dirt paths where nothing grows in a perfect circle, in abandoned shrines with music pressed into the walls, and maybe in you. Are your feet still? Is your heart quiet now? Or has something inside you begun to tap? A finger, a toe, a thought pulsing like a drum beneath your skin. It starts small. It always does. A dream. A song you don't remember hearing. A twitch in your leg you blame on the cold. But then it grows. And before you know it, you're dancing. Without music. Without will. Without end. But don't be afraid. Not yet. Because I'm still here, and the candle still burns. You see, I tell these stories not to frighten you, but to prepare you. The world is not made only of what we can see. Some truths move like mist. They curl into corners and wait. And some stories, like this one, are not over when the telling ends. They only begin. So sleep now, if you can. Let the air wrap around you. Let the dark cradle your thoughts. Let the silence speak. And if you hear something, a soft thud, a footstep, a rhythm you cannot explain, don't follow it. Don't answer. Just remember what I told you. And stay still. Stay still. Stay still. Ember breathes in and out. You've walked with me through death, through fever, through madness, and still you lie here unclaimed. You are brave, or foolish, or maybe both. But whichever you are, you made it to the end, and not everyone does. The candle's nearly out. Just a wick, just a glow, just a whisper. And me, your red-haired witch, with too many memories and too many names. You can call me Ember, and I will remember you.
Now rest. The rhythm is far away for now, but it knows your name, and one day it may ask you to dance. Good night. Sleep well, if you can.